What's a ghost's favorite erogenous zone? Boobies! Hello, Champagne Nightmares. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, I don't know how you found me, but I hope you'll stick around, haunt us for a while. Hit that subscribe button and become part of the ghostly family. I am Janessa, and I am North Dakota's trash queen of glam, geek, and gore. And today, I'm going to give you my top 10 countdown of the best spooky ghostly stories. Now, I love some blood and guts. I am an 80s slasher girl for life. I love Friday the 13th and Sleepaway Camp and all of those gory, fun slasher movies. But occasionally I love a good spooky ghost story where it's more about the story and the suspense than it is about the blood and the guts. So I thought I would compile a list of my 10 favorite ghost stories for you to enjoy. If that sounds good, then stick around. We're getting into it right now. So I love a good ghost story. I love them. As a kid, my mom used to read age-appropriate ghost stories to me. I loved spooky stuff very early, so she was always looking for things that were appropriate to my age group that she could read me that were a little bit spooky, a little bit creepy. And especially as a kid, a lot of those are ghost stories. So before you get into serial killers and masked camp counselor killers, you have to go through some ghost stories. So I loved that. In second grade, I wrote a book of my own ghost stories, and I cut the paper out to look like sort of the little white sort of outline of what a kid thinks a ghost looks like. It was very cute. It's probably in a cedar chest at Mama Champagne's somewhere. But I love a ghost story. So let's go ahead and talk about why. Because I love ghost stories for different reasons, and I love different types of ghost stories. So let's go ahead and talk about it, starting with number 10. In the number 10 spot, I'm just giving this to The Sixth Sense. Now, The Sixth Sense is a great movie. It was very well done. That shock of an ending was bananas. And I think now people kind of know what it's about. I think they know what's up. And so it's harder to trick people with the twist or whatever. But The Sixth Sense, yes, it's a great story. I have a long, complicated relationship that probably deserves its own video with M. Night Shyamalan, because he has done some really great movies and some really terrible movies. The Happening is a fucking hate crime. I've thought about doing a whole video about The Happening, but then Jamie French did a video about The Happening. I'm gonna link that right here for you. And I'm not sure that there's more that I can add. She is so funny and she did such a great job with it. And it's just such a terrible movie. Maybe I'll still make that video at some point. Let me know down in the comments if you're interested in my commentary on why The Happening was such a terrible movie, along with The Village. But this is one, I gotta give credit where credit is due. The Sixth Sense was a fabulous movie at the time. No one saw that twist coming. It was great. So let's just give number 10 to M. Night, always showing up in a cameo in his own movies. Who do you think you are, Stephen King? But you're not, though. So we'll give it to The Sixth Sense and keep it pushing with number 9. In the number 9 spot, we have Crimson Peak. I really loved Crimson Peak. I think that this was an underrated movie. I think it got some bad reviews at the time, and I thought it was a lot of fun. I really loved the idea of this kind of spooky house, and I loved that in the end, the ghost wasn't haunting or threatening the main character. The ghost was actually there to warn her about what the people around her were doing. I thought that was a really interesting twist to have in there, and I loved that the ground had the weird chemical in it that made it rain the like red snow, and that looked very creepy when she's wearing the white gown. I just thought it was a really fun movie. It's nice and spooky, it's atmospheric. It doesn't have anything too smart to say necessarily. When we get down further on the list, there are some that I like because they're sort of ghost stories as metaphor. This one is not very metaphorical. It's all on the surface, but everything on the surface is really good. In the number 8 spot, we have Poltergeist. So speaking about ghost stories that have something to say, the 1982 film Poltergeist comes out at the time where slashers were becoming big. And if you think about the early slashers, like Black Christmas, there's a video for that right up here, as well as Halloween, a lot of those movies, a lot of those early slasher and kind of early 80s horror movies were about the suburbs. They were about white people fleeing the threat of the urban. And of course, what's the threat of the urban? Spoiler alert, it's black people. Well, not black people, but racist people's idea of black people. Does that make sense? It was sort of this threat of who lived near you and all this kind of stuff. And it really was about white people separating themselves out, running off to the suburbs and trying to get away from that. What I love about movies like Halloween and Poltergeist is that it's a reminder that the inner city and people of color are not the real threat. In fact, if it's anything, it's the history of racism and the way people have divided themselves that lead to these threats. So as white people flee the inner city and move to the suburbs, the threats come with them. Sometimes in the faceless, unstoppable killer like Michael Myers, and sometimes in the ghosts of Native Americans who were slaughtered in this country genocidally. Whoopsie. It's all about the history of what people have done in this country in the name of colonialism. So their house is built over an Indian burial ground, which is such a trope in horror, but it leads to this very spooky, kind of awful experience for this suburban family. So it's telling people that you're not safe just moving yourself out of the inner city and moving yourself to these white enclaves in the suburbs, because the history of what white people have done and what white supremacy has done in this country will follow you. It will stick with you. That's your curse that's going to come with you. So I think it's a really interesting way to bring that into this suburban setting, create this very spooky experience, and that poor little girl who played Carol Ann, who ended up dying of cancer. I mean, it's just, she's such a perfect child heroine in a horror movie. A lot of times horror movies, and especially slasher movies, wouldn't include children. It was always teenagers, which I know that like teenagers legally are children, but it was always like children who were older, who had gone through puberty, and often young adults who were the camp counselors. It was not usually about the younger children. And so with Poltergeist, we had younger children who were actually facing this threat. And it was saying that everybody is tainted by this history of white supremacy, of the genocide of Native Americans, of the way that we have covered over history and covered over sacred places, and that is going to impact everyone, even your children. So good. It's such a fun movie. The effects are a little bit wild. It was the 80s. They did a lot of practical effects, but definitely check it out. It's a good time. Poltergeist. In the number 7 spot, we have Here's Johnny, The Shining. I love Kubrick's The Shining. Now, don't get me wrong. I enjoy Stephen King. I did a ranking video recently that I've already tagged in this video that is all about Stephen King and my favorite books, and I love The Shining. I do. But I do think that Kubrick made some really smart choices with The Shining to make it an even scarier movie. And I love the ghostly nature of it. I love him talking to people that aren't there. I love the ghost of the Grady twins. That is such a great moment when Danny meets them and they're like, "Come play with us, Danny, forever and ever and ever." I mean, unless you're talking about porn, twins are creepy. But I loved The Shining. It was very ghostly. I love that he was always having those conversations and that he became part of the ghosts at the hotel. And when they pan away at the end and he's in that photograph, it's just such a great movie. And there are so many conspiracy theories. There's a whole documentary called Room 237 that's all about the different theories about what Kubrick was trying to say. And some people say that it's all this metaphor of the genocide of the Native Americans. And they say that you can trace this Calumet baking powder can and the way the can is facing in different shots, that's his like message about Native American genocide, and the artwork in the hotel. There are some people who say that Kubrick was trying to tell people that the moon landing was faked, and that he helped the government fake the footage of the moon landing. So there's just some wild, crazy, fun conspiracy theories. So definitely check out Room 237 if you want to know more of those. And if you just want a really well done, creepy ghost story, check out The Shining. In the number 6 spot, we have The Ring. I love The Ring, and I love Japanese ghost stories because in American ghost stories, there's always this idea that if you set right the wrong, if you bring balance back, then the ghost will leave you alone, you'll be safe, everything will be lovely, there will be a happy ending, and that ghost can finally ascend to their final reward, blah, blah, blah. In Japan, if you get a ghost, you're just fucked. You're gonna die, bitch. You can't get rid of a ghost in Japanese ghost stories. They are stuck there. They are revenants. They are part of the place that they have become a ghost in. They just are. You can't get rid of them. And that's what I love about The Ring, where they have that moment that was meant to tease you into thinking that she had like found Samara's body. She figured out what happened. She solved the murder of this little girl, and she finds her body and lifts it up, and it's this whole thing of like everything is being set right. And then her boyfriend gets murdered by Samara. It's not over, bitch. It ain't over. Like, you didn't fix nothing. All you did was find her body, but that ghost is still coming, and still coming for you and coming for your kid. And so at the end, the only way that she's able to avert her own death and her son's death is to make copies of the tape so that Samara can kill more people. She has to make a copy of the tape, and her son has to make a copy of the tape and leave it around for people to find so that they can watch it and pass it on to their friends, and they can watch it and continue the cycle and feed her hunger for more and more victims. That is dark, and I love it. I love a girl with goals. I am here for it. Gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. I love it. I love that it's just a whole different way of thinking about a ghost. In American ghost stories, so many times we think, okay, a wrong has happened, the ghost is here, if we can correct it, the ghost will be free. And in these Japanese stories, they're just like, no, this ghost is gonna fuck you up. If you were gonna do something, you should have done it before I died, because now I'm here, and I'm pissed, and I'm not going away till you're dead. Fun. In the number 5 spot, this is an indie film that I really love. If you haven't seen this, I think it might be streaming on Amazon. Definitely check it out. It's called Family Possessions. It is directed by Tommy Faircloth of Horse Creek Productions. I've met him a couple times at Days of the Dead events. He's a lot of fun, and his movies are kind of quirky and cool. He uses a lot of practical effects that are very well done, and he often has cameos from people like Felissa Rose. And Family Possessions is a really fun movie because it actually blends together two horror subgenres. So on the one hand, Family Possessions is kind of a slasher movie. So it's this family that moves into this like childhood home that they've inherited, and people start to die, and people get killed off one by one, and usually a body part is taken. And in the background of all of this, there's a lot of discussion about the fact that the kids, the main characters in the film, their grandmother may have been a witch. And so there's a little bit where they tease this kind of witchy stuff, but then you get caught up in this like slasher plot, and you're watching and people are getting murdered, they're getting killed off, and then at the end, you're like, wait, why did we have all that stuff about the witch? And then it takes this really fun, interesting kind of supernatural turn. So it really combines slasher with ghost stories. I love slashers. I love ghost stories. Of course I was going to love this movie. If you can find it, definitely check it out because it's so much fun. And it's really unique for being that blend of the two subgenres. In the number 4 spot, M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong Who. I love The Others. That's the one that has the twist for me that I think is really so good. And I feel like fewer people talk about The Others anymore. So I really love it. I think the twist is really clever. I think it's very interesting that you've got these two creepy children, and Nicole Kidman is very strange and unhinged. And the children have this weird disease where they are deathly allergic to sunlight. They'll break out into rashes and hives, and eventually it will kill them. So they have to stay locked in their house, and their father is away at the war and never came back, and they don't know why, and they're waiting. And at some point, the father shows up, but he doesn't seem the same. Like, what's going on? We don't know what's happening. It's very interesting, and it's just such a fun movie. And then, of course, these servants show up that say that they used to work at the house a long time ago, and she lets them in, and they kind of become part of the house, and she doesn't know what to do with them, and she doesn't know if they're plotting, and then it gets really kind of spooky. It takes a spooky turn, and there's all of this stuff about loss and about grief, and it's just a really good movie. And I think that if you haven't seen it and you don't know what's going to happen at the end going into it, it really is a surprising, shocking twist. So I think it's a lot of fun. If you haven't watched it, watch it and don't read about it beforehand, and check out the others, because that is a twist that's much better than most of M. Night Shyamalan. In the number 3 spot, we have the original Haunting from 1963. Don't watch that goddamn remake with one of the Wilson brothers. I can't even be bothered to look it up. It's the shaggy blonde-haired one that married Jennifer Lopez in that rom-com that came out last year. And it's got Catherine Zeta-Jones. It's just not very well done. It's not true to the Shirley Jackson source material. They tried to gore it up a little bit, and it's supposed to be a ghost story. It's a haunting. And that's what makes The Haunting so effective, is that they did very simple, very scaled down practical effects. They used a lot of really phenomenal sound design and just created the most heart-stopping, spooky ghost atmosphere for these characters to interact in. It's so good. It's so well done. Now, I do love the Haunting of Hill House series that they did on Netflix. That one is also fun, but that takes a very different sort of perspective. That one uses the source material, but it turns it into a family drama with occasional ghosts. And there are some real jump moments in the series, but nothing can beat the 1963 classic. It's so well done. It's so spooky. It's one of those movies that has basically no blood, very little death in it, but it's so scary. It's so creepy. It just crawls up the back of your neck and stays there. It is so good. In the number 2 spot, if you love 60s music and ghosts, then buckle up for Last Night in Soho. This is such a good movie. It's the last movie that Diana Rigg did before she died. We stan Lady Olenna of House Tyrell forever. R.I.P. Queen. But I love her. She is so much fun in this. And, of course, we also have Anya Taylor-Joy, who is on fucking fire lately. She was so good in The Menu. I mean, horror fans have had some really good, really smart movies the last couple of years. And Anya Taylor-Joy has been a big part of at least those 2 of them. The Menu is so good, and so was Last Night in Soho. And it's about this young girl who maybe sees things. She may have some sort of like psychic powers, and she's getting ready to go to fashion school. She's a wannabe fashion designer. She's obsessed with the 60s, and she loves 60s music, and she has all of these old records, Petula Clark and Cilla Black, and she just loves them and listens to them. And she doesn't really fit in with the bitchy mean girls at the fashion college, and so she decides to move out of the dorms and move into a room, a like upper floor room that this old woman is renting out. So she goes and she gets a room at Miss Collins, and she's kind of this gruff old lady, and she has all these rules and no boys coming over. I don't like boys. So every night when she goes to sleep, she falls into this dreamy ghost world of this woman from the 60s named Sandy, who is blonde and beautiful. She's played by Anya Taylor-Joy, and she follows her around. She wants to be a singer. She wants to be a nightclub singer, and so she gets all dressed up in this beautiful party dress, and she goes and she wants to sing, and she meets this talent agent who maybe is a little sketchy, we don't really know. She has this flirtation with him, and he punches out a guy, and they go running out into the street, and he becomes her agent, and he gets her hooked up with a gig. And as the main character keeps falling asleep and going into these dreams, she sees Sandy's life kind of unravel. It turns out that the agent is kind of a creep, and it just becomes darker and darker, and eventually she has a vision where she thinks she sees him kill her. And so she wants to go to the police and say, you have to solve this crime from the 60s. You can imagine how much the police are excited to try to figure out who this unknown woman is from the 60s. That didn't go very well. But she keeps being haunted by these things, and she keeps sort of turning into Sandy. So she bleaches her hair blonde. She finds this coat in a thrift store that was probably Sandy's coat. And the dress that Sandy is wearing in the first dream kind of becomes the inspiration for her fashion project. And she's getting all caught up in this story. And she has to solve the murder of Sandy. And it's a really interesting story as it unfolds, and these spectral forms kind of start chasing her, and as she becomes more and more unraveled, and there's this cute boy from the fashion school who is nice to her and is trying to help her, and it's so good. It's just so good. Check it out. If nothing else, if you love Petula Clark's Downtown, it's so good. It's just so good. And in the number 1 spot, this is where it gets a little bit controversial. Some people might not agree that this is a ghost story. I don't care. In the number 1 spot, we have Candyman. Okay, hold on. Before you freak out, I know that most people would say that Candyman is like a slasher kind of movie because he shows up and he kills people with the hook and it's all gory. It's not your typical ghost story. I will give you that. It is not your typical rattling chains, white sheet kind of ghost story. Candyman is all about the ghost of white supremacy and racism in America. And I love, love, love the remake, reboot, requel, whatever you want to call it, the new Candyman. It really fleshes out that sort of mythology. And at its heart, Candyman is a ghost story. It's all about people who have been murdered in the name of white supremacy, because of white supremacy, because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, they loved the wrong person. And much like Toni Morrison's fantastic novel, Beloved, it's all about the fact that our country remembers. The land remembers. And so this story of Candyman becomes this way for people to process their collective grief about what has happened to their communities, to their friends, their neighbors. I love what the new Candyman does to flesh out that mythology. I mean, who doubted Jordan Peele? Nobody. I mean, Jordan Peele has been doing such amazing things in horror. I didn't love Nope. It was okay, but it wasn't as good as the first two. Nia DaCosta did an amazing job directing it. Teyana Parris is so good. It's just so, so good. It's so well done. I love Coulson Domingo. I love Coulson Domingo. I always see him in things, and I always have to remember, like, where do I know him from? Coulson Domingo was in, I think, the second season of a big gay sketch show. When Logo first started and they were doing all of their own programming, and it was actually a gay network, they had the big gay sketch show, and I think Coulson Domingo joined it in the second season, and it just had all these really funny characters. He used to do these recurring sketches where he would read dirty, dirty, dirty Craigslist ads as Maya Angelou. Oh my god, the cesspool that was the personals of Craigslist. It was so disgusting. Candyman is just so good. It really is about that history. And now the world that we live in, where they're trying to block any mention of white supremacy and what white supremacy has done to black people and people of color in this country, it's just disgusting that they're trying to remove any reference to that. And that's really what books like Beloved and movies like Candyman are about, is that as much as you try to just forget that history, as much as you try to just brush it under the rug, the land remembers, the blood remembers, and it's so good. And that's why Candyman, both the versions, it's kind of like in Scream 6 when Kirby and Mindy are like facing off about their horror movie street cred, and they're saying Candyman, original or remake, and then they both at the same time go, both. Absolutely. I think the original Candyman, there were some flaws in how it was put together, and I think that the remake really kind of addresses those and gives it a reason for it to work without it becoming, you know, this sort of racial trauma from the minds of white people. It really kind of addresses some of that and brings it around to a whole different meaning. I love it. I'll never say it into a mirror 5 times, but just looking at the camera, I will say that I love Candyman, Candyman, Candyman. That's enough. We don't have to tempt it. All right, boils and ghouls and zombies. I hope you enjoyed this little countdown of my top 10 favorite ghost stories. I love ghostly movies. I love spooky, haunty stories. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, let me know down in the comments below. And also let me know your favorite ghost movies. What are some ghost stories? There were so many that I thought of that could have been on this list, and I wanted to keep it at 10 because I paid for that damn neon countdown. I'm going to get some use out of it. And so if there's any that I missed, any you think should have been on this list, let me know down in the comments. While you're down there, don't forget to give me that thumbs up to tell me that you liked this video. Or if you're like, I don't like ghosts, why you gotta be bringing up the past? If you're trying to ban critical race theory and you think I'm just one of them woke leftist nightmares, then just, you know what? Give me that thumbs down. I will take it. It's all engagement. The algorithm isn't a piggy bitch, and neither am I. Although if you think I'm a woke leftist nightmare, how did you even end up on my channel? And while you're down there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell notification icon so that you'll be notified every time I do an upload. I try really hard to make sure I have at least one video a week, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, you might even get a bonus video. Ooh, spooky. If you'd like to chat, banter, or commiserate between uploads, all of my social media will be linked down in the description box below, including a link to my website, The World of Champagne at JanessaJ.com. Thank you so much for watching. I love and appreciate all of you. I absolutely love ghost stories, and I love to tell them around a campfire with some friends. So let me know in the comments what you'd like to watch, and give me some recommendations. And until I see you again, bye. Pretty girl.
Yeah, I'm glad I got that for you on camera.
She's obsessed. Obsessed? We used to do that at drag shows. Every once in a while, my friend Georgia would, like, print out just the most disgusting ads from Craigslist and bring them to a drag show. And that's what I would read in between performers, just as, like, a little comedy bit. And so he did it, but did it as Maya Angelou, which makes it even crazier. It's so good. Shamalama ding dong.